A longtime Kings Island favorite, celebrates its 50th anniversary season this year. Hello, everyone. Alongside Ryan Sir, I'm Don Helbig, and this is Tower Topics.
Tower Topics is a podcast by Kings Island fans for Kings Island fans because that's who we are and that's who we care about. Let's kick this off by thanking our Prestige members. Thank you, Aaron Borg, 330T, Logan Lipper, Brian Hauser, Lil Mac 21, Miss Mandy, 1983, Jacob Fix, Stephen Hornack, Eric Grau, Damon Barnes, and Ian Crawford. Thank you guys so much for supporting Tower Topics at the highest level. That's the Prestige level. If you want to be involved in Tower Topics, there's a link in the description. Members get early access to the content, exclusive videos, exclusive live streams. Some tiers even get some free stuff.
Well, Ryan, a Kings Island Classic is hitting a milestone this year, and of course, I'm talking about Shake, Rattle, and Roll, the park's Troika ride. It's celebrating its 50th anniversary, marking 5 decades of whirling and twirling guests in the Coney Mall section of Kings Island.
I want to point out, and I've said this before, my first ever Kings Island ride. And we were trying to determine why my first ever Kings Island ride was one of the most eastward rides in the park, because it means I walked in the entire park to get there. But I don't recall, but I have a distinct memory of this being my first ever ride at Kings Island.
Yeah, and you probably would have had the Vortex in the background, your first ever ride, because that came up in 1987, right?
Yeah. I do not remember a Kings Island without the Vortex. So in 87, I would have been 4. So I didn't go to the park until like 91 or 92, I think.
This was first introduced in 1975 as part of Kings Island's effort to expand its flat ride collection. The attraction was originally named Troika, as they are.
So the Troika, as it was called back then, was introduced in 1975. It was made by Hoos Rides of Brennen, Germany. And what was it? The first year it was named the Troika, and then the name, which is the manufacturer's name, correct?
That is correct. Yeah, that's what you would find at many parks across the country. They're going to be called Troika.
Right. And then they changed the name to Shake, Rattle, and Roll after a year. Do you remember the name change? Because it seemed like they did this a couple times, didn't they?
They did change the name. There, a lot of guests in the early years still called it Troika. Some of the park maps still called it Troika. But Shake, Rattle, and Roll came in 1976, and they just felt at the time Troika was just generic, a model name, and that they needed to change it to something that better fit the Coney Mall theme, and that's why it was given the name that it has today.
I mean, that's fair. I kind of like the name Troika, to be honest with you. But you're right. If you want to stand out in the industry, you don't want to have your Troika named the same thing as every other Troika. But this was not a Coney Island transplant. This was one of the first flat rides made for Kings Island.
Exactly. That was what made it unique, was that, it wasn't a flat ride that came over from Coney. It was one of the first flat rides that was introduced at the park. And here we are 50 years later, and it's still there, and many of the others are not.
I'm glad we have it. I really do enjoy Shake, Rattle, and Roll. I think it's such a fun ride. And we'll get to the new light package and stuff later, of course, but it's 3 arms, each of which rotate gondolas and spin in synchronized motion, delivering a smooth yet thrilling experience. Really, I wouldn't call it airtime, but it's more like it flings you up in the air. It's kind of a different sensation. But I like I said, I really enjoy it. But it's been
that was one of 2 rides in 75 too. It was one of 2 rides, and the lesser talked about of the 2. The other one, do you know what it was?
Zodiac,
right? That was the one that caught all of the attention. But I remember, these were big deals back then. When the park would announce something, they'd have media events for these rides, and you'd get news media from Indianapolis, Columbus, Louisville, Lexington would all come out to ride them. And the local news, would do their reports and everything. So it wasn't always, well, if it's not a roller coaster, they're not going to come out and cover it. I mean, they used to cover this just like they did any roller coaster. And I remember for me, I was more excited about this one because it kind of had a lot of the scrambler in it, which at that time was one of my favorite rides.
Yeah.
Um, so I like that part of it. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's been a long time favorite. I rode it with my daughter when she was young. She loved it. So it's multi generational for me. I mean, it's withstood the test of time.
It certainly has. So, oh, I should point out somebody in the comments mentioned this that we did not mention this in the show, but we're talking about Zodiac very briefly. That we didn't mention that. I guess it had like the barrels could spin. It's
Yes.
fun. I mean, we didn't mention that. I didn't know that. But somebody mentioned that in the comments. That's neither here nor there. But Shake Around and Roll, it's turning 50, which is hard to believe, but it's not the only ride at Kings Island that's celebrating a milestone. There's several of them this year.
There are several of them this year. Whitewater Canyon, that's going to turn 40.
Mm-hmm.
You've got Extreme Sky Flyer, 30. Hard to believe that's been around for 30 years.
I know, right?
Backlot Stunt Coaster celebrates 20 years.
Feel
Boot
old yet?
Blasters on Boo Hill reaches 15 years. Time flies with that one. I remember
I
that was
know.
first introduced. And both Franklin's Flyers and Snoopy Space Buggies, they're going to hit that 10-year mark this year. And of course, Orion turns 5. So yeah, a lot of different milestones for the park this year. But I think back to Shake Around and Roll real quick. For me, one of the things that makes it stand out at Kings Island, um, you find these at other parks. We've talked about that. Six Flags parks, Carowin, Cedar Point. They have the Kings Island's version, the longevity of it, and the dedicated following that it has. I think that's what separates a little bit from some of the others. Cedar Points came out the year later, 1976, I believe, is when Cedar Point introduced theirs. Has longevity, 49 years now, but it doesn't have that following that
Mm-hmm.
Kings Islands has. For some reason, it just isn't. It doesn't feel the same. You don't have the same vibe with it. When people talk about their favorite rides at Cedar Point, their favorite flat rides, that one rarely gets mentioned. Where at Kings Island, if you talk about your favorite flat rides, it's often at the top of the list.
It's got to be. Well, I mean, if anything, Kings Island doesn't have a whole lot of flat rides, so
Not
that's got to be.
anymore.
Yeah, that's
Right.
got to be a part of it. Also, I brought this up a little bit earlier, but that light package that was added to it,
Mm-hmm.
5 or 6 years ago, actually, based on all these numbers, it might have been 30 years ago for all I know. But
Yeah.
that's incredible. I think that looks so good, and it modernizes the ride so much. I really think that that's impressive.
That added so much to the nighttime experience in Coney Mall that even if you're not going to ride it, you see people just gathered around watching it.
Hmm.
Uh, especially during the Haunt and Winterfest seasons. I mean, it just really adds so much of that lighting package. That was the time also when the lighting package was added that they repainted the cars
Hmm. And the
and
gondolas, like the
yeah,
arms.
yep, and made the cars white and red instead of just multicolor throughout.
Yeah,
I like it better now the way it looks,
me too.
but it's just a very popular ride. There's usually a little bit of a wait for it. It's something that now, if it was gone, if they retired it, you would know that something was missing from Coney Mall.
Yeah,
Just part
there'd
of
be
the
an empty plot of land in front of the empty plot of land directly behind it where Vortex was.
yeah, yeah, but it's very much a part of the fabric of Coney Mall, and it fit when it was introduced in 1975 what Coney Mall was. I mean, that was probably the most vibrant part of the park was Coney Mall in the 70s and 80s. Rivertown took off after the Beast was introduced, but it was still Coney Mall, especially at night. No area of the park looked better than Coney Mall, and I still feel that way.
The only thing I've said this forever, and they have it part of the year now, but to have like festoon lighting to give it kind of like a carnival feel, I think that would perfect Coney Mall. They do it for Haunt and like Winterfest, but I'm saying like a more permanent thing, kind of like near Gemini, like the Gemini
Mhm.
Midway, something like that. I think would be really cool for Coney Mall. But yeah, Shake, Rattle, and Roll. That'll always have a special place in my heart as my first ever Kings Island ride. So make sure you give it a spin. It's 50 this year, 50th anniversary. Cool.
Makes it one of the oldest rides at Kings Island.
It certainly does. This is a segment we like to call Buy or Sell.
All right. By 2030, Rivertown will get back theming elements and a ride to match its name.
By 2030?
2030. Just 5 years down the road now, Ryan.
I'm going to take a cautious buy. I think that there's going to be a resurgence, and I don't know if it's going to be within the next 5 years or not, but there's going to be a resurgence of we want Coney Mall to actually be like how it was in the 50s. We want Rivertown to actually be like a logging community, stuff like that. I think that'll come by 2030, maybe not, but I'm going to put it down as a buy. What about you?
I'm going to sell.
Okay.
I don't think they care.
I don't think they care right now, but I think the priorities shift quite often.
Yeah. Well, I hope, but they wouldn't have let it get to where it is now, where it's just a shadow of Rivertown once was, if it mattered. So, where's the water in Rivertown?
Yeah.
Whitewater Canyon, that's it. But I mean, you don't have the ponds, the lakes, the water around the Beast. People want that to come back. That would be so cool for the Beast 50th if they did bring the water back.
You know what would be perfect for Rivertown?
You'd have to put up plexiglass though, so people don't throw their trash in there. But
yeah, I don't think it's likely. If it is likely, it's going to be upon maybe under the turnaround or something. I don't think it would be under like guest areas for that reason.
yeah,
But you know what I always envision would be a perfect way to model Rivertown off of would be the blacksmith alley at Dollywood with like the water that runs through that whole contraption system and through like the different wheels and stuff. I think that would be really cool for Rivertown.
That would be.
That. So I guess we're agreeing to disagree on this one. I hope I'm right and you're wrong, honestly, but
I do. I hope I am wrong, but I just don't see that being we're that close to 2030. So like I said, 5 years out.
Yeah.
And they would have to be already talking about that, getting some initial plans in place for that. You still have the vortex plot that's open.
Right.
If what goes in next year doesn't go in the vortex spot. So I don't know. Just doesn't look promising or feel promising to me.
But okay, let me forget about. They mentioned a ride. Let's take the ride out of the equation. What if it's a year when Kings Island doesn't have a capex, like hardware capex, and they find $500,000 in the budget? Like that's the sort of thing they would do with that. You know what I mean?
I would love to see that, but I could see them wanting to put that in, that money into something else.
Cedar Point.
I would love to see it. There's things I never thought would come back that did. The Glockenspiel,
right?
With the Fest House. I mean, Mike Kuntz wanted that. Battled for it, got it, and it's been, great to see. There's little touches like that. There were some other things. He wanted the feel to be a little bit more what it was back in the 70s and 80s on International Street. It's starting to get there. It's still hard to be that when you go down International Street and you still see some of the VIPs, with graders. But losing Skyline on International Street was a good thing. Putting Grain and Grill there helped kind of create a better vibe for International Street. Whether you go in Grain and Grill or you don't, or whether you went in Skyline or you don't, not seeing that local IP there, I think made a difference on International Street.
Yeah. Well, The problem with International Street is the revenue opportunities definitely outweigh the theming opportunities, because if you think of like Build-A-Bear, that really doesn't fit in there. But at the same time, you talk about something where it's like, okay, Sally, we'll build your stupid bear on our way out. If it was back in the back of the park, like it is at Cedar Point, I bet they'd lose a lot of revenue because of that.
Yeah, they would. I think that when you look at Rivertown, some little things, like say you had that, you got $500,000 or whatever, putting up a little thing like a wood carver's shop,
Mm-hmm.
Something like that would add to it. I'd just love to see some of those little touches that just feels like a Rivertown area, other than just the name of the area is Rivertown.
Right. Cool. Let's move on to some Six Flags headline news.
What do we got?
We've got the American coaster enthusiasts, ACE to their friends, will recognize two iconic roller coasters as ACE roller coaster landmarks in 2025. Shockwave at Six Flags Over Texas and American Eagle at Six Flags Great Adventure. These coasters, known for their innovation and lasting appeal, will join an elite list of 50 landmark coasters across 42 parks worldwide. Since opening in 1978, Shockwave, a Schwarzkopf-designed double looping coaster, has remained a standout attraction. It was the first roller coaster to incorporate heartlining, a groundbreaking design feature that enhances ride comfort by aligning rotational forces with the rider's heart position. Its distinctive quad tube track and minimal support structure further set it apart. The ride recently gained renewed recognition in The Legacy of Schwarzkopf, a documentary highlighting the work of the legendary roller coaster engineer Anton Schwarzkopf. Shockwave will be the second coaster at Six Flags Over Texas to receive ACE landmark status, joining Runaway Mine Train, the park's oldest operating coaster. American Eagle, which debuted in 1981, was the first wooden roller coaster built by Intamin Amusement Rides. Upon opening, it set records as the world's tallest and fastest wooden coaster, boasting a 147-foot drop and a top speed of 66 miles per hour. It remains the longest racing wooden coaster with 9,300 feet of combined track. ACE will officially recognize American Eagle during CoasterCon 47, the organization's largest annual gathering of coaster enthusiasts, hosted at Six Flags Great America in June. It will be the third coaster at the park to receive landmark status, following Batman the Ride and Whizzer.
I think both of these rides deserve that distinction. I love Shockwave. When I was at Six Flags Over Texas, couldn't get enough of it. There's another ride similar to that in some ways, was Mindbender at Six Flags Over Georgia.
Yeah.
Love that ride. But yeah, Shockwave is just a great ride. When you look at it today, not the tallest, fastest, anything like that, but it's iconic. It wouldn't be Six Flags Over Texas if that ride were to be removed. The American Eagle, it deserves to be in there because of what it stands for. It's a ride that in the last few years, though, one side operates while they work on the other side during the summer.
Mm-hmm.
So they took away the racing element. So that part of it, I didn't like, but yeah, it's still just structurally, people remember Son of Beast, just how good that looked, visually.
Yeah.
I think, this coaster, American Eagle, you can't drive by the park, like on your way to Milwaukee or back, and not just, be mesmerized by just how massive it is. I mean, it's an impressive structure. Got a couple rides on it last summer when I was there, as well as their other rides that that have received a landmark status. Batman the Ride and Whizzer, both fantastic rides. So, yeah, congratulations to both parks for receiving this distinction from our friends at the American Coaster Enthusiast.
Absolutely. We'll be right back with the listener questions. First listener question, Robbie from Norwood, Ohio. What's the best PR stunt ever pulled at Kings Island?
That's a hard one. There's been a lot of good ones over the years. I would say the ones I was involved with, probably the time that we were going to replace the parking tolls
I remember
and
that.
had everybody thinking that it was going to be the racer that was going to get torn down, because we said two things that had been at the park since its inception, will be removed at the end of the season. And the picture was an aerial shot where you could see the two parking tolls, but the racer was in that aerial shot,
Right.
Prominently in that shot. And everybody was thinking it was going to be the racer. And I remember everybody on the marketing team being concerned that, people were talking about that in the news media, not only locally, but across the country, that the racer could be torn down. And I said, well, within 48 hours, they're not going to be upset. They're going to be thrilled. We could be adding a new teeter-totter, and they're going to be super excited about that because they're not touching the racer. And it was just two parking tolls. So I think for me, that might have been, one of the best ones, because people really, really thought the racer was going. And we didn't even reference the racer. We just said two things that have been at the park forever.
You know what's funny is I had a feeling you were going to bring that one up, but
that just came to mind right off the bat. I mean, there's been a lot of different ones, but I think that one, in terms of the coverage and stuff, yeah, that would be number one.
Well, as far as international coverage, though, one that comes to mind is one that most people don't know about. Actually, it's when you had the tennis players play tennis on the fountain. Well,
Yeah.
I remember the paparazzi, because remember, tennis is a way bigger sport outside the United States, and the paparazzi was crazy about that. Now, did you sell a bunch of tickets by having Kings Island in the news in France? Probably not as much as you did with the racer thing domestically. But with that being said, like, that was really, really cool to see, like, Kings Island worldwide in the news as a result of something that was like probably the dumbest publicity stunt ever done, because they played on a ping pong table.
Well, it was kind of they put the platform in for them to play on. They weren't going to be able to go, back or to the side too much, because if they did, they were going to fall in the water, so they couldn't go off the edge. But they've, hit it back and forth for a little bit. Got some great photos of it, some great video of it. The media was able to capture a lot of great shots. We let them go out in a canoe that we had, so they could get some real close-up shots of it. So that, that was one too. Yeah, that could have been one of the best stunts. I would certainly think that's up there. But that was one they just asked me, do you think you could get any coverage out of this? And I was like, yeah. So I can turn pretty much anything into a story. I'll figure it out. And I guess we did.
You did. And if I recall correctly, I remember you weren't around the media at the time, and I was texting you and you weren't responding. I think that was the same day that somebody had passed away on a ride, like on either Firehawk or the Bat. Somebody with a pre-existing heart condition. Was that same day?
No, I was at the event, because I took a lot of pictures.
Well, I feel like why do I feel like that was the same day as one of those?
No, I took a lot of pictures.
Not that somebody like fell out of the ride or anything, but somebody like a pre-existing condition or something. I feel like you were dealing with that. Maybe not, though. Maybe I'm remembering that incorrectly.
Yeah, anyway. I took a lot of the pictures that, and then the one that got submitted to the Associated Press that they used. So yeah, but that was, oh my gosh, that was kind of fun. Yeah.
Let me see if I can find a picture. 2018, was that right?
No, it was before that.
It was before that.
2012, 2013 range, probably.
Yeah.
Just put tennis players, Kings Island, fountain, see what comes up.
That's kind of what I put, but unfortunately, every article lists the tennis center across from Kings Island. So I'm just finding a bunch of tennis pictures. Nonetheless, little homework for the listeners. Look it up. It was fun. It's on. There's definitely stuff on KIC because I took those photos. But
I'm surprised you remembered that.
I remember everything. Next listener question, Kevin from Ohio. What's a hidden
Hi,
gem at the
Kevin.
park that most
Kevin
guests
is a
overlook?
Kevin is a regular.
I appreciate his questions.
Oh yeah.
What his question this time though is, what's a hidden gem at the park that most guests overlook?
For me, it is the Grand Carousel. I
Fair.
think that as the years go on, it's going to be 99 years old this year, but everyone wants to run, the younger generation, they want to ride Diamondback, Orion, the Beast, Mystic Timbers, Banshee, and they forget about the classics. You don't see uh, the teenagers and the young adults wanting to ride the carousel unless the young adults, unless they have kids, they're not typically riding the carousel. So for me, I think that is the hidden gem that nobody really thinks about when they're at Kings Island.
I'm going to go with the Bat. I feel like the Bat is far more fun and thrilling than the traffic it gets, and that's simply because of where it's placed in the park. If it's out of sight,
Right.
out of mind, so nobody thinks to go back there. But I think that that's a terribly underrated ride.
I think it's very underrated. I think it doesn't get the attention that it deserves. I think you could put Adventure Express in that category too, especially at night.
I was wondering if you'd bring up Adventure Express, actually. All right. Pam from Cleveland, Ohio asked, what's one part of Kings Island's history that you think is underappreciated?
Part of the Kings Island history that's underappreciated. I would say that the number of original rides that are still there.
Yeah.
And how the park has, preserved those rides and kept them going for future generations to enjoy. It's not often when a park reaches the age that Kings Island has. This will be its 54th season, not year. Somebody's going to call us out and say it's 53. Subtract 2025 from 72, and it's 53. It's 53 years, but seasons, it's its 54th season. So I think that for me, it would be just the number of rides that you could have ridden in 1972 that they're still there.
I think that is certainly interesting, especially the Coney transplants and stuff. To me, I think that the fact that is such a big deal that maybe the average person under maybe 25 may not know is that Kings Island had a full-fledged zoo. The wild animal habitat or whatever name was going by at whatever period of history. But Cedar Point has had a couple of petting zoos. They've got one now where the animals get out and stuff. And, a lot of parks can claim that they have petting zoos and stuff, but Kings Island had elephants and giraffes and baboons I got out, So I think that is like an extraordinarily interesting part of park history that a lot of people just don't know about because a lot of time has passed. I mean, I was a little kid when they got rid of it.
Yeah, it was, that was a nice attraction that they had with the animals. It was something I tried to do a couple times a week.
Mm-hmm.
And you never knew what you were going to see. Sometimes, I remember one time a rhino just decided to sit on the track.
That happened to me one time too.
Yeah, just sitting on the track.
I don't know
we
if
got
it was a
stopped
rhino,
for like 20 minutes, while we're waiting for it to get up and move on. But no, it was fun. It was, to see all the wildlife, and it was, one of the best kind of attractions when you look around the industry of those that have that. I thought it was the best.
I don't have like super sharp memories of it. Again, I was little. Do you think that would be included in the Gold Pass if it was still around today?
Yeah, I think they'd have to work
dinosaurs. You're guilty of that, Don. So what about real animals?
Yeah, real animals. Yeah, I think it would have to be something where you could do like an add-on to do it. It was very expensive to operate.
What do you think the add-on would cost? You got to remember, The temptation would be it to be really expensive, but the reality is people aren't going to fork out. I'd say it'd be like $30.
25. Yeah, I was thinking $25 range.
I would totally go for that to be able to hop on the monorail anytime I wanted and look at like rhinos and stuff.
You had tigers, you had giraffes. Riding the racer, you could, see them. They were right behind, like where the blue racer is.
Yeah.
There was the train would come around the corner, and then there was a fence up, and they were right along the fence.
Yeah, kind of where Adventure Express is now, and a lot of like that's one of the areas where they are.
Adventure Express, yeah.
Very cool. All right. Hey, I'm Ryan Sir, along with Don Helbig, and this is Tower Topics.